Welcome to the Mentor Podcast, where the most highly motivated entrepreneurs come to get their weekly dose of financial stability with host Ron LeGrand, as well as other nationally recognized thought leaders who will teach you how to get, grow, and protect your wealth.
Well, hello, everybody. This is Ron LeGrand, back again with another exciting episode of the Mentor Podcast today, because I got a very special guest. You're going to love this guy if you want to make some real serious money. Our mission is to help you make more money, make it faster, make it easier, make it without risk, and keep it long enough so you can retire very wealthy. And our guest today is certainly dedicated to that mission. His name is Kearney, and I don't know anybody knows more about Lee than Lee, so I'm going to let him tell who he is and where he came from today. But for years, I've been teaching people, if they will just get out of their own way and let other people do most of the work and look at this like a real business, not just like a few real estate deals, that their whole life would change, and nobody better at that than our guest. Lee, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on your show, Ron.
All right. Give us a little background on where you came from, how you got started, and where you're at today, because, boy, you're in a position that most people would envy today. And, I haven't known you all that long, but what I know of you is that you're a guy that people should pattern their business after. And so your message is turning a few real estate deals into a real estate business, correct?
Absolutely. Yes. Systems, processes, and people have been the basis of my success. But as you requested, I'll go back to the beginning of where it all started. So back in 2003, I actually flipped a condo by accident. I was in Ireland, which is where I'm from. I'd finished college here in the States, got my degree, went back, lived there, bought a penthouse, got broken into, hated it, put it back on the market, and in 3 months made more money on that property by accident than I did in my current job at the time. For me, that's when the light bulb went off. Complete accident, 35,000 euro in my pocket. And I said, this is amazing. I said, I didn't even mean to do this. I recognized I'd stumbled upon something special. So I moved back to California in 2004. One of the first things I did, not really even understanding what a mentor or a coach or any of those terms, I just wanted to find someone who did real estate. It ended up a guy I went to church with, did real estate, flipped houses, exactly what I wanted to do. And I said, how can I help you? And he said, well, you can go to Home Depot. We can pick up supplies. So I trailed this guy around for weeks. He showed me where to buy, what price to buy, and basically how to do it, how much money to put in a house. One of the biggest mistakes people do at the beginning is they put a whole bunch of money in the house. They don't get it out. And they're completely disappointed. So really just was a blessing right at the beginning to have someone to hold me by the hand. So I spent a couple months after college. So I was taking my master's course at the time, looking at nice, found a house, and did exactly what he told me to do, exactly to the T. I was so scared. He told me to put sod because we're in Southern California. He goes, if you don't put sod, you won't sell the house. I mean, I did exactly what he told me to do. Sold the house first day, the exact same way he told me to do it. Put out a bunch of signs, do an open house, get competition, everything he told me. So that was fantastic. Did another house in California in the end of 2004, decided to move back to Florida. And on my second deal, made my first and second mistake. I hired a friend to do the rehab, and I tried to rehab a house in California from Florida. Complete and utter disaster. Somehow I stumbled out of that second house with a small profit. Now I'm in Tampa, Florida. So again, I asked a lot of questions. What I'll say to everybody out there, Ron, don't be afraid to ask questions. So many people think it's a dumb question, or I should know this, or I'll try to figure it out myself. You can do that, but that's a really long journey in real estate. And that's why I see it. I have students come through that they've been doing this 20 years and they try to do it themselves. And then they listen to me one time going, I wish I'd done this the first time. I wish I'd talked to someone like you, because they've done it the hard way. They think it's a grind. Real estate's a grind if you try to do everything yourself.
Lee, they're men. They have testosterone. It's not their fault. There ain't no way they're going to take directions. Because, gosh, if it's working perfectly, it's got to be fixed.
Exactly. No, and it's funny. I've always been humble, and I think that's one of the other pieces of the secret sauce that's made me successful, where I've asked those questions at the beginning, lots of questions, detailed questions, because I recognized I didn't know. And what I found is I attracted some really high players that were attracted to the fact that I did not have an ego. I was helping them in their business, providing value, learning along the way, and it's a beautiful thing. So found my friend's father buying at the courthouse. I'm asking questions. What is the courthouse? What's the foreclosure? I didn't know any of this stuff. So I quickly became, by asking lots of questions and getting really smart mentors in my life early on, became one of the biggest courthouse buyers in Hillsborough County. Now, fast forward to 2007, I've now made about $2 million in 2 years, 2.5 years in real estate. Now, what happened to me in 2008? I went from $2 million to negative $2 million, literally lost everything.
Now, Lee, you're the only person I've ever heard that story from, right? At least this morning.
Absolutely.
So far. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, everybody's perfect. Yeah. No one ever has a bad day, right?
We know what tough. I call that, Lee? I call that training.
You're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And it was the most humbling training of my entire life, because at 27 years old, I had made and lost $2 million, was back at square one. And my wife at the time, I said, we just got off a honeymoon. I said, we're broke. We're done. We can't pay any of our bills. I'll tell you one of the biggest mistakes that took me down, and I know you're really, really big on this. I took on a bunch of personal debt on rental homes that were not cash flowing. Tenants started moving out. Stuff started breaking. The economy was slowing down. I couldn't flip houses and make a profit. I'm running at a negative cash flow on my rentals. My world collapsed literally overnight.
Mm-hmm.
So
personally guaranteed debt?
Absolutely. It took me down.
Okay.
And I, by the grace of God, did not have to file bankruptcy, but I had a lot of short sales and essentially had to start back at zero. So what I looked at in my business, I said, where did I go wrong? And what I realized is that A, I was flying by the seat of my pants. B, I had defined myself as a rehabber when the market was telling me the complete opposite. I wasn't looking at the market. It was the perfect time to be wholesaling houses because there was a lot of risk in the market. But instead, I had positioned myself in the riskiest end of the market. And so that was a tough pill to swallow. So I vowed moving forward, by the way, when you make a mistake, you should be doing something completely different. I said, I'm going to look at the market. I'm going to see where the opportunity is. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to choose a strategy and try to fit it into the current market. So when I looked around in 2008, everybody's running for the hills. I realized wholesaling is the best strategy. You can buy houses dirt cheap. You can sell them to other investors with cash. And so I was making $5,000, $10,000, which, by the way, doesn't sound super exciting. Fast forward to the end of 2008, my first year after losing $2 million, I was back up $1 million. And so I was in and out of properties, risk-free, selling houses before I had to close on them. Fantastic. And from then, it's been history. Really, since the end of 2008, it's been history. I made an entire change where it was a market-driven approach to real estate. Look at the market, find the opportunity, figure out how to capitalize on it. Grew a team, really put a lot of effort, which is where we're going with all this. You want to have a business, you got to have great people working for you. If you have a bunch of people that don't know what they're doing, it's going to be held together very, very, basically like a house of cards. If you don't show up at work one day, your systems and processes fall apart because you don't have great people behind those systems and processes pushing the buttons. So I made a big effort in people as well as systems. A lot of people focus on getting...
Stop. I want to make sure we're clear on what you just said. First of all, you said if you don't show up one day, well, your whole goal is to make it so you don't have to show up one day. And you cannot do that without good people. And you cannot get good people unless you have the patience to find the right ones and then spend time hiring them and making sure they are good for that job. That's an entrepreneur's nexus right there, because we just don't want to do that. Yeah, we'd rather just hire them and then fire them if they don't produce something they didn't properly train to produce. So skip forward with me for a while. Tell me where you're at today, and then we'll go back to how you got here, okay?
Sure, absolutely. We bought and sold several thousand homes. I think my last count was over 7,500. Our record year, just to give you some perspective, was 2,500 transactions 1 year.
In 1 year?
From the hedge funds for 1 year, yes, sir. And
Jeez.
I have owned over 300 rental properties, but with the big run up in prices, one of my mentors really drilled into my head about market cycles. And what he said was interesting. He said, it's not important to call the bottom of the market. It's important to call the top. And so I recognized where the core amount of my rental properties was approaching peak pricing. So the stuff that we bought 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, we've just got done selling. And so I went from over 300 rentals, over 25, about almost $30 million of rentals, now down to like 3. And so I'm positioning myself, for a correction in the market. And that's one thing that I've realized. You got a market like Florida, for instance. This is where you'll never hear me make national statements that are just ignorant by nature, because every real estate market is different. There's things like interest rates that do affect things nationally. But in Florida, for instance, it's a cyclical state. By nature, real estate goes up, real estate goes down, real estate goes back up, and real estate goes back down again. It's an investor-driven market. There's definitely very predictable market cycles in markets like Florida. And so in knowing that and believing that, I have to make adjustments in my business. I see it so many times where business owners just don't want to change, and that not want to change is what puts them out of business. Blockbuster is the poster child for that. Netflix came along. They could have bought it for $50 million. Blockbuster told them to go pound sand. And I don't have to tell you how history played out on that. So I don't want to be that guy. I don't want anyone listening to the show to be that guy or that girl. You pay attention to the market and you make sure that your strategy is going with the tide. It's a multi-trillion-dollar market. You're not going to beat it. You got to figure out how to capitalize on it.
Correct. And move with it. So how many houses you buy a year right now, Lee?
Our volume has slowed down to about 300 on the purchase side. So we'll do about 600 transactions this year. I'm very, very attentive to the market conditions. And what we're working on right now is building some proprietary software on the foreclosure side of things, because I've seen Liz Pendon step up. I've recognized the market change has already happened in South Florida. It's coming our direction. And I want to make sure that we go back to a foreclosure, pre-foreclosure, option-driven approach to real estate. And so I'm shifting my attention. So because I'm in the building phase of that, I'm making sure to not chase every deal. I don't believe with our business model, it makes sense to chase every house.
All right, we'll clarify now. What do you see changing in your marketplace that's going from south to you?
Sure. So what we do is we track Liz Pendons. Liz Pendons are consistently on the rise month over month in Florida. This started about 2 years ago in South Florida, and it's now creeping into most.
We got to make sure that all the folks listening that don't know what the heck we're talking about don't get blown away with these terms. List pendants is nothing more than somebody's filed foreclosure.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So you think the foreclosure market is going to heat up in the coming days?
It is heating up. So the front line of that is the foreclosure filing. And even though we're in what's called a judicial state, where there's a judge that has to rule for this entire process for someone to actually be foreclosed on, that can take anywhere from months to years. The front line of this, or the crack in the armor, is the number of foreclosure filings. That number is on the rise, and that means a market shift is coming. And what's funny about that is it all happens at once. And I'll tell you a story about why that happens. Investors get spooked. You ever notice this in the stock market? If there's bad news, it just tanks literally in minutes because everybody sells at the same time. What happens in real estate is investors stop buying. That's what slows down the market. Economics 101, supply and demand. If you take your demand away and everything else is the same, that creates a huge gap in pricing because you've got a large chunk of your buyers that suddenly stopped buying. This happened last market cycle, coupled with a worldwide economic collapse, which forced the market down in some cases 80%. Do I believe the market's going down 80%? No, I don't. But I do believe that we are going through a normal market cycle. We've approached peak pricing here in Florida. Affordability is down. I mean, it's just a problem. An average family can't afford an average house. Even if you took all of the data out of the way, that's not a sustainable business model. There needs to be a reset there. It's going to happen, and we're preparing our business for that. I mean, just to give you some simple numbers, Ron, if I can, My average rental purchase was 30 to 50,000. Our average exit price was 150 to 170.
When?
In the last 12 to 18 months, selling them.
Okay. I'm glad to hear you could get them that cheap, because where I live, what I used to pay 30 grand for is now 60, 65 grand in horrible condition.
Yep.
And of course, I know that's going to change. It always does. Everything changes. But
yes, sir, it does.
I need to get to some basics here, because I'm out there listening to you. And what I want to know is, I got so many questions for you, man. We're not going to get them in. But first of all, how do you exit from properties today? Are you wholesaling them, or rehabbing them, lease optioning them, selling them for cash? What are you doing?
We only buy cosmetic rehabs. We rehab them quickly with low budget, and we get out of them quickly. Or else we wholesale them. Or thirdly, we wholetail. A lot of people are not familiar with that term. That's somewhere in between wholesale and retail. We basically take care of some of the scary items. Let's just say windows are boarded up. There's a hole in the roof. We do some quick fixes, and we then wholesale, and we refer to that as a wholesale. Correct.
Wholesale is usually to owner occupants. They pay a lot more.
We are day trading real estate right now, because we want to eliminate market risk. The longer you own an asset, the more your market risk increases. So we try to be very nimble with our properties right now.
Yeah, well, okay. I could get you on the other side of that, because the longer you own that house, the more money you're going to make. Because that's only if you can wait out a big downturn like we had in '08, though. Which another whole subject altogether. I'm not going to get there right now.
Well, it's really down to your financing, and that's where you've become an expert on that, where you obtain financing on the house through the sellers in most cases, where you get favorable terms that really change the post of everything I just said. And I would say that long-term holds are primarily determined by the type of financing and the terms on that financing. That really is a big determinant.
Absolutely correct. And in my case, if I ever catch them guaranteeing debt, I'm going to personally beat the crap out of them with a big bloody board, because that's the biggest mistake, is guaranteeing debt. As both of us will
10 years ago,
to.
11 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm actually 12 years ago.
I did too, sir. I did too. All right. So today you are exiting quickly out of everything you get, and you're not putting tenants, buyers in houses for any long-term deal, except maybe on a few work for equity deals.
Correct. What we're doing is we're building joint ventures with large hedge funds. When prices do settle down, our goal is to buy $1 billion worth of single-family assets here in Florida during the next downturn.
Okay. And how many people do you have working on your team?
Today, approximately 10 people. When we were processing 2,500 assets that one year, I had about 35 staff. And that's what I would say to everybody out there. You got to be flexible. You are the business owner. You are in business to make money. By making money, you pay for everyone around you. You know, a lot of business owners think they're in business to provide employment. The problem with that is that can put you out of business. Overhead alone can put a business owner out of business, even if you're making millions of dollars.
Absolutely. It don't matter what you gross. It matters what you get to keep. And you are correct.
Yes,
There's only one reason to own a business, and that's to make you rich. And if it doesn't, you're in the wrong business, or need a new business owner. So are you still buying mostly foreclosures today, or other types of property as well? I mean, do you deal in any pretty houses at all on terms?
We don't at the moment, because what we recognize, I really would say this to you and everyone out there, that you want to pick your focus in real estate, because there's so many different ways to make money. The problem with engaging 5 or 10 different strategies is that you do all of them poorly. And so your pretty house model works fantastic, because you buy them for little or no money down. You get an immediate down payment when you go to sell them. You're cash flowing every month, and you're building equity. I mean, it's a win-win in a lot of cases. But you know, our strength is in acquisitions and in processing assets and in processing a lot of assets. That's my skill set. That's what I've become really, really good at. So we're preparing to buy a lot of assets at a cheap price, put tenants in them, have a 5 to 10 year hold on them. And just to give you some perspective, that $1 billion portfolio will, based on historic numbers, conservatively will cash out for 50 to 100% on top of that on the way out. So it's a large business model, dealing with more zeros this time than we did last market cycle. My biggest regret last market cycle was not bringing more money to the table and not buying more houses. However, today, if I'm selling an asset for what I think is a great price, I don't want to be buying the same asset. The side of the trade I want to be on is selling that asset.
Okay. Now, you started out buying houses after the '08 thing. How did you get into the mindset of actually treating these real estate stuff as a real estate business?
That's a great question. So in 2008, I realized after making $1 million with me and an assistant that unless I built out systems and processes, I was going to do the same thing in 09, 10, 11, 12, and in perpetuity. And on top of that, I was going to work 14 to 16 hours a day. And on top of that, I'd never take a day off because I was the beginning and the end of the entire transaction.
How old are you, Lee?
I'm 40.
So back then you were 30.
Back then, yes, I was about 30 years old when I started in 08, when I started really ramping up.
You know how rare it is for a 30-year-old to actually come to that conclusion?
I don't know. I only have my own reference point.
You're weird, man. Most people have to live their whole life before they finally figure that out. So
I will tell you this, though. I've had students that 50, 60 years old that are still trying to do every part of the transaction themselves from start to finish.
I know.
Then they're working those 14, 16, 18 hours a day, and it's sad. There is a better way. There's a better way.
We both spend our life trying to get them out of that trap because all they got's a job. I get it. So something must have happened. Is there something that triggered your mindset from I ain't going to keep working my butt off, I'm going to go build a real business? Was there a trigger?
Was so many. Actually, I'll tell you what it was for me is that I realized that there was more opportunity in the market that I could capitalize on with my own two hands and do it. I couldn't get through it. The amount of foreclosures for those people who lived through that era, the amount of inventory in the market was endless. It was just like I bought up entire streets. I mean, it was just crazy what was happening.
It was.
And I realized that I needed to build out a team. I needed to build a team out quickly. I had people then that came to me and said, we want to buy houses too. And I said, you know what? I can fix up these houses. I can lease these houses. That's when I got into property management. So many different opportunities by the sheer volume of assets forced me in a way to think differently. And a good friend of mine, Tim Bross, one of the things I have learned from him, he goes, if you want better answers, ask better questions. So a big shift in my mindset was just asking better questions on if I want to go from 100 assets a year to 500 assets, what do I need to do differently? I just started asking those better questions. And by asking that, I realized systems, processes, and people. And not everybody, a lot of people focus on very complicated systems, very complicated process. I started out early on, and even today, I make my processes easy to follow. I dumb them down to a third grade language because I want to be able to make sure anybody who's sitting in that seat can follow that system, follow that process. And that's a big key for everybody out there. Make your systems simple and don't make them hard.
And the only way you can have a system is for you to get out of it, and none of it requires you to do anything except watch over the system. And then, frankly, quickly replace yourself with somebody to do that.
Completely agree. But the ultimate goal is to get a chief operating officer that can run your entire organization, which I do have right now. You know, for those people who know me, I'm involved in several other industries. Real estate itself takes less than 20 hours a week for me of my time, and is at this point a business that runs primarily without me being involved in all of the decisions.
There you go. Me too. Except I'm twice your age. Took me a lot longer to figure that out.
Well, you're selling yourself short, Ron. People know you're a rock star. So.
Yeah. I didn't even get started till I was 35, man. And
and that just shows you, that you can. That's another thing about real estate. You can build up a very large wealth base, that legacy wealth. You can do it. You can start at any point in your life. And real estate, by the fact that you're dealing with big widgets, with big chunks of money, allows you to get from zero to millions of dollars in a relatively short period of time. You can become financially free within a few years in real estate. It's a great vehicle.
I've never seen a business that has such low overhead that creates such large checks quickly as this one. And I have several of them too. In fact, I tell everybody you should go buy a restaurant then you learn what real business problems are. Yeah,
if you take a wholesale fee, your average transaction is $5,000 or $10,000. You take a rehabbing business, your average transaction is $20,000 or $30,000. You do an owner finance pretty house model, your average transaction is $20,000 or $30,000. You take a corner store, your average transaction is $5. How many $5 transactions do you have to do to make $10,000?
Yeah. Well, first, what kind of investment you got to make to open up the corner store, and how many hours a day you got to work there to make it work? Yeah. And then how much money you're going to make a maximum, and you might be able to buy a night out at Morton's with it. So we deal in high transaction values, and that's what makes this business so interesting. And the really cool part is anybody can enter into it. And any real estate takes the money. You'll spend more money on your training than you will on the real estate. And that's if you get it from folks like us, not if you get it from the school of hard. Well, especially if you get it from the school of hard knocks, I guess. You mentioned, you got 7 steps of what you're going to do, and we're not going to get through those right now. So we have scheduled a simulcast coming up for you, and you're going to teach for 3 hours on it. In fact, guys, make a note right now. It's on July 25th, and it's from 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. That's noon to 3 Eastern Standard Time. So we won't even make you Californians get up too early. And Lee, you're going to spend 3 hours solidly teaching all these steps on how to get where you are today. Can you describe what's going to go on there for me some?
Yes. Yeah. In broad terms, I'm teaching people how to shift their mindset from being a real estate investor to being a real estate business owner where they can step out of that business, because you can have a business that has active income, but you can be passive. A lot of people get very confused in real estate. They think by owning a rental, it's a passive investment. No, if you're managing that rental, it's active income for you. But you also, by contrast, can have an active business like I do and put it on passive income control by having the right people in place, the right systems, the right processes. And what we'll be going through specifically is all the way from mindset to how to find deals, how to fund those deals, how to figure out those deals, how to rehab them, and then how to flip them. If you're going into property management, in that particular section, I'm going to give you all of the nuggets I've learned over 15 years of owning rental properties, the mistakes I've learned that have swung the needle millions of dollars in my direction. Just some very simple changes in property management. So I'm excited because you're basically getting 15 years of my experience in 3 hours. And what's cool about this, instead of spending 3 days on these topics, which I've done many times, I'm condensing it down to just the best bullet points, the nuggets in each one of those 7 steps, getting right to the point, which means your hand's going to be tired after the simulcast, because everything I talk about in those 3 hours is going to be the most important things I teach.
Yeah. And I'll make a note now. This is not a webinar, guys. This is a simulcast, which means he's doing this live, not recorded. And therefore, he will be taking questions during this thing. You can put them up on the screen, and he'll take a break now and then and answer them. And then there's no way we're going to get them all answered on the simulcast. So we are going to literally answer them for several days after this thing is over by email so that we can get them all in. And look, this is $99 to get on this simulcast, pathetically small amount of money. And when you go down to register for it, you're going to get a bunch of free stuff as well. But that's not why you're doing it. I want you there if you want to see what the big boys are like. And again, it's 3 hours. So set yourself a place and time to where you are not going to get interrupted. I don't want no kids bumping in and out. I don't want no dogs barking. I don't want no wife screaming at you or husband screaming at you. I want your focus for 3 hours. You can't get it at home, go rent a hotel room somewhere, because this 3 hours could probably change your life. And you know what? I'm going to make this statement right now. My staff don't even know this, Lee. For $99, if you ain't thrilled with this content, just tell us and you get your $99 back. I guess that's about as fair as I know how to get. All right. By the way, we can only put 500 on it. They shut us off after 500. And it don't take long for us to get 500 people on this simulcast. All right. So, Lee, when I know you're going to be at our summit next spring in Vegas, which starts March 31st through April the 3rd. And I know that you have services that you provide, and I know you actually work with a few select people when you find out they're actually serious. And do you spend more time teaching what you know or more time doing what you know? You just told me you spend 20 hours a week at it.
At this point, I because of the fact that my business runs so well, I spend equal amounts of time in both the educational side of the space as well as the operational side. I actually love both. Real estate, I'm so grateful for because it's provided all of the opportunities, all of the other investment vehicles I'm now involved in, all come from the wealth that generated from real estate. Now, conversely to that, teaching real estate is amazing. There's no better feeling when someone comes back to you 3 months later, 6 months later, 6 years later, 10 years later, and says, "You changed my life." I don't know how to describe that feeling, but it's one of the best feelings in the world. It's like when my son looks at me and says, "I love you." It's a very similar feeling when someone looks you dead in the eye and said, "You changed my life." So I like both. I really get a lot of satisfaction out of both businesses, and I value my reputation. So I get straight to the point. I teach people stuff that's real, teach people stuff that works today, not stuff that worked 20 years ago. And people appreciate that. And, you couple that with social media, it's leveled the playing field. It really makes smart operators who excel in their field, they're masters of their craft, like me, shine head and shoulders above people who just are talking about what you should do and not actually doing themselves. So I take a lot of pride in my business, both on the educational side and on the real estate investment side.
Yeah. And I'm going to go back to how you started this. The first big lesson you learned was to listen to people who know what they're doing, not other people who have no clue, but give you all the worthless advice you could just stand. And then carefully select who you take that advice from. And fortunately, you latched on to the right person in the beginning and learned that lesson and continued that lesson throughout instead of listening to everything you hear and read. In fact, I got a T-shirt. It says, "The whole world is full of crap." and it is true. Be very, very careful to whom you listen. So listen to the people who have been there and done that, not the people who have done it twice and are now becoming an expert on it. And I'm going to tell you right now, I quit worrying a long time ago about trying to please everybody because that will never, ever happen.
Funny you mentioned that. The sign behind my office, which is one of my 3 posters, that says, "Run your own race, set your goals high, and don't stop till you get there. Never hope for more than you work for it." So that's what's literally behind my desk. That's my backdrop. And I just encourage everybody out there, run your own race. Don't let anyone else dictate your destiny. You figure out where you want to go. You run that race, and don't let anybody else distract you from that.
And that is correct. And hopefully we can encourage people to do just exactly that. But you got to figure out what it is you want to go and what the end of that race looks like, and keep the dream stealers out of your way along the way. Lee, you got any last minute words for our folks? If you had to give them one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, one piece of advice is don't just keep writing down goals and ideas. Focus on execution. A lot of people, set a goal, they set a plan, they never execute. That would be my one piece of advice. Once you realize where you want to go, you realize how you want to get there, execute, execute, execute.
Are you saying that education without implementation is kind of worthless? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I am. And as dumb as that sounds, most people will never get out of the gate because they just don't execute. You've got to execute. You get the right training. You can set your goal. You get the right game plan to get there. Execute. That's the only way to turn your dream into a reality.
Couldn't said it better myself. And with today's technology and today's sources available to you, literally there's almost nothing for you to do in this business if you let the sources work for you and make decisions on what you want to buy and what you want to sell and who you want to put in place and who you want to outsource to. Not hard. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Lee. What an incredible guy and what an amazing thing that he's accomplished. So you should know we're going to have Lee at our upcoming real estate summit in Las Vegas next spring. It's going to be March 31st through April 4th. He's going to be one of our featured speakers. And there's a lot of cool things going on there. Go to RES 2020. That's RES Real Estate Summit 2020.com and check it out, because if you are interested in what Lee says, are interested in making a lot more money in real estate, removing the risk, we're going to have an amazing faculty there. And actually, we're going to do a lot of deals while you watch with leads that you might bring and other students will as well. It's an incredible event. We have a lot of fun. We enjoy a lot of networking and give away over $100,000 worth of cash and prizes while we're at it. So go check it out at RES 2020 right now. Get registered, because we're about to raise the price, and hopefully I'll see you there.
That's all for this edition of the Mentor Podcast. To connect with Ron and learn how you can attain financial freedom, as well as up-to-date strategies to grow and protect your wealth based on today's discussion, go to www.connectwiththementor.com.